Hi, my name is Alister Chapman, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to get the best possible picture quality from this camera, the Sony PXW-FS5. Now, one of the great things about the FS5 is that it comes with 9 picture profiles. The picture profiles are memories, and each one of those memories has a very different look. Each one gives you a different looking image. They're pre-programmed from the factory, but you can also go into each profile and change the settings to adjust them and vary them depending on exactly what you want. Picture profiles 1 through 6 use variations of standard gamma, and they give you what I would call what you see is what you get pictures. So what you see in the viewfinder is more or less what the viewer will see on their TV screen at home. Then picture profiles 7, 8 and 9 are set up for shooting with S-Log2 and S-Log3, where the image will be graded and post-produced before providing that final finished look. To try and keep things a little bit simpler, I've divided this video into 2 halves. In the first half, I'm going to go through picture profiles 1 through 6 and some of the settings in those profiles, and then in the second half of the video we'll look at picture profiles 7, 8 and 9 and how to shoot with S-Log2 and S-Log3 with this camera. Before going any further, one thing that's very important to understand, and this applies to any video camera, is that the best image quality is normally obtained when the camera is at its native sensitivity. The native sensitivity of a video camera is when the camera is set to 0 dB gain. No gain added. Something you have to remember is different gamma curves will result in different brightnesses of picture, and as a result different gamma curves will have a different ISO rating if you're using ISO to measure the camera's sensitivity. The FS5 will display its sensitivity as either dB or ISO, and you can select this in the menu. My recommendation is to use dB and not ISO. As you can see from this table, each of the gamma curves in this camera can have a different ISO rating. Unless you're able to remember all of these different ISOs, it can be quite confusing as to whether you are actually at the camera's native sensitivity or not. If you use dB and leave the camera at 0 dB, then you can be certain that you're always at the camera's native sensitivity. So my recommendation, stick with dB, it's actually much simpler. To use the picture profiles, all you have to do is press the picture profile button on the camera here and then use the scroll wheel or the joystick to select the picture profile that you want to use. Picture profile number 1 is a mirror of the camera's standard settings. Picture profile number 2 gives a DSLR-like look to the picture with high contrast and vivid colours. Picture profile number 3 uses the ITU 709 gamma curve. That's the same gamma curve as used for HD television, combined with the Pro colour matrix, and this gives neutral colours but with contrast that looks good on a standard TV. Picture profile number 4 is another 709 based profile. So it gives natural looking contrast, and in this case it also uses a 709 colour matrix, so it gives very accurate colours. Picture profile 5 is an interesting picture profile to use, as this uses one of Sony's Cine gammas, Cine gamma number 1, and this gives a more film-like look to your pictures and improved highlight handling. Picture profile number 6 uses another Cine gamma, this time Cine gamma number 2, and then profiles 7, 8 and 9 are designed for S-Log2 and S-Log3, and we'll come on to those later in the video. Now, if you go into any of these picture profiles, you can change many of the settings. The settings that we're going to look at in this video are the gamma settings and the colour mode settings. It's worth noting that you can reset any of the picture profiles back to the factory default simply by going into the picture profile and choosing the reset option. This will restore that one picture profile back to its factory settings. If you want to save your picture profiles, you can do this by saving a camera profile. When you save the camera profile, it saves all of the picture profiles and all your other camera settings to an SD card. You can then recall that profile in another camera or back in your own camera to restore your favorite settings. The gamma setting affects the contrast of the picture and the dynamic range that can be captured. That's the range from the deepest shadows to the brightest highlights that can be captured in one go. If we look at the gamma options in the picture profiles, we'll see that we have standard gamma, and this is the standard gamma that the camera has coming out of the factory, designed to give you good contrast and a reasonable dynamic range. Then we have the still gamma curve, and this gives you quite a contrasty picture and mimics the picture you'd get from a DSLR. So if you're looking for a punchy, contrasty look directly out of the camera, you might want to consider this gamma curve. Next we have the 4 Cine Gamma gamma curves, Cine Gammas 1 through 4. These all provide a more film-like highlight roll-off, and they give you an extended dynamic range, so they cope very well with difficult lighting situations. Cine Gamma number 1 gives a very large dynamic range and handles highlights very well, so it works very well in bright light situations. Cine Gamma number 2 is very similar to Cine Gamma number 1, except this one is limited to a peak recording level of 100%. This makes it broadcast safe, so this gamma curve is particularly suited to broadcast applications and direct-to-air applications where it's important that the camera doesn't record above 100%. Cine Gamma number 3 is a little bit more contrasty than Cine Gammas number 1 and 2 and has a slightly smaller dynamic range. Cine Gamma 4 raises the shadows slightly compared to the other Cine Gammas, and this actually makes this one very good for shooting in lower light situations. ITU-709 is the standard gamma for HD television, so this will produce accurate contrast when viewed on most HD TVs. ITU-709-800 is another 709 based gamma curve, so for the shadows and mid-range it gives you natural looking contrast, but this one has an 800%, that's a greatly increased dynamic range, and it will hold on to highlights and overexposure much better than the standard 709 gamma curve. And the last two options are S-Log2 and S-Log3, and I'll talk about those later. If you're using the ITU-709 base gamma curves, then you'd normally expose skin tones at around 70%, and middle grey will be around 41%, with white between 80 and 90%. If you're using the Cine Gammas, it's worth noting that they are designed to be graded, and as a result they should be exposed a little bit darker to get the very best highlight range and highlight roll-off. I find that when using the Cine Gammas, they work best if you expose skin tones at between 60 and 65%. That's around about 1 stop darker than you'd expose the conventional gammas. The next item to look at is the colour mode, and of course you must remember that you can mix and match any of these colour modes with any of these gamma curves to create your own looks and styles. The standard colour mode matches the camera's standard settings and should give you quite vibrant but neutral colour. The still colour mode is designed to match a DSLR or a stills camera, and it gives you punchy, vivid colours. The cinema colour mode is designed ideally to be used with the Cine Gammas. It produces slightly subdued colours for a more film-like look. The Pro colour mode gives you very neutral colours. It's slightly desaturated compared to standard, and I actually find the Pro colour mode very good if you're going to do any grading or post-production work on your footage. The ITU-709 matrix is designed to work with the ITU-709 gamma curve to give you neutral contrast, a neutral saturation and realistic looking colours on an HD TV. And then we have black and white as well. Although to be honest, in most cases I would choose to shoot in colour and then remove the saturation in post-production if I want a black and white picture rather than using a black and white colour setting. If you want to change how vivid or how vibrant your colours are, once you've chosen your color mode, you can use the saturation control to make the pictures more or less vibrant, more or less saturated. One point to consider: if you're shooting something that is very, very colourful, perhaps a stage show with coloured lights, reducing the colour saturation when you shoot may allow you to capture a slightly greater colour range. You can always then adjust it and tweak it in post-production to get the colours that you want. Picture profiles 7, 8 and 9 are set up for shooting with S-Log2 and S-Log3. Now it's important to note that when you're shooting with S-Log2 and S-Log3, your workflow is a two-step workflow. What you're trying to do with the log gamma curve is capture the best possible digital negative that you can then take into post-production, and then using color correction tools or grading, develop that negative to give you your final look. So you're not normally shooting in camera to get the look that you want, you're shooting to get the best possible negative. When outputting RAW to an external recorder, you should use picture profile 7, 8 or 9 to ensure that the camera is set up correctly and to allow the full output range to be monitored via S-Log2 and S-Log3. The white balance settings and exposure settings are exactly the same for RAW as S-Log2 and 3, so simply follow the S-Log guidelines given here for the best results when outputting RAW. Picture profile 7 is set up for shooting with S-Log2, picture profile 8 is set up for shooting S-Log3 with XDCAM 3 and picture profile 9 is set up for shooting S-Log3 with XDCAM 3. When shooting with S-Log, your exposure levels are very, very different to standard gammas, so you need to be aware of those levels. For S-Log2, if you're exposing a grey card, it would be exposed at 32%, while white would be 59%. With S-Log3, that middle grey card would be 41% and white would be 61%. You can use zebras to expose a grey card with S-Log2 and S-Log3. To do this, you have to set your zebras to 41% for S-Log3 and to 32% for S-Log2. I also recommend that you reduce the zebra aperture to between 2 and 4%. This will make exposure of the grey card more precise. However, when shooting with S-Log2 and S-Log3, it's often preferable to overexpose a little bit. Unlike standard gammas, log gammas prefer to be overexposed. You're better off being slightly overexposed than underexposed. From experience, I've found that by shooting between 1 and 1.5 stops brighter than the figures recommended by Sony, that I get the best results. So my recommendation on the PXW-FS5 is to set zebras to 70% and then use a white card or a white piece of paper so that you have a little bit of zebras over that white card or paper. That will then give you an exposure about 1 to 1.5 stops brighter than the recommended levels, and that will give you some very, very good results after post-production grading. Another way to expose 1.5 stops brighter for S-Log2 and S-Log3 with this camera is to add an exposure offset to the automatic exposure system. And you can do this in the camera menu through the AE shift function, and just add an offset of between +1 and +1.5. Then you can use the one push auto button for the aperture to quickly set the exposure 1.5 stops over the base setting. This is very quick, very easy to do, and really handy when you don't have a white card or any other reference when shooting in the field. It's very simple. There are 3 different colour spaces designed to be used with S-Log2 and S-Log3. For S-Log2, you should use XDCAM, and for S-Log3, you have a choice of either XDCAM 3 or XDCAM 3.Cine. With the PXW-FS5, I strongly recommend the use of XDCAM 3.Cine with S-Log3. The white balance is preset, and this is necessary to ensure that you're always getting the best dynamic range from the camera. So you need to go into the picture profile for the log curve that you're using and choose the correct white balance, either 3200 for tungsten lighting, indoor, shooting at night on the street, things like that, 4300 for shooting under fluorescent lights, and 5500 for shooting in daylight. Any small errors in your white balance would be corrected in post-production, and that's completely normal with a log workflow. So which do you choose, S-Log2 or S-Log3? Well, this camera doesn't have lookup tables, so if you're not using lookup tables, I find it easier to shoot with S-Log2. It's a little bit more contrasty than S-Log3, and that makes focusing a little bit easier. And I find that the picture looks a little bit better in the viewfinder than the very flat S-Log3 image. S-Log3 is easier to grade in most cases, but with this camera I just find that S-Log2 works better because of the limitations of the 8-bit recording in UHD and the lack of lookup tables. So that would be my recommendation. The PXW-FS5 does have a monitoring function called Gamma Display Assist. And what this does is it converts the S-Log2 or S-Log3 to 709 gamma for the viewfinder display. It only works in the viewfinder, so you'll only see this in the viewfinder. This function works very well if you're using the base exposure level. But if you do want to shoot with your S-Log2 or S-Log3 exposed a little bit brighter, it does look very overexposed. So that can make it a little bit difficult to use. If you wish to use it, it's in the viewfinder menu, and if you switch it to auto, it will automatically switch to the correct correction for S-Log2 or S-Log3 as you change the picture profile or gamma curve. Don't be afraid of shooting with S-Log2 or S-Log3 with this camera. You can get some very good results. But you do need to have a good workflow with good color correction or grading tools to really get the best out of it. I strongly recommend that you use a proper grading package to work with S-Log2 or S-Log3 material, such as DaVinci Resolve or Lumetri within Adobe Premiere.